We're incredibly pleased to present this session called Maximizing Momentum to you today. You know, I've actually been involved with the Audience Measurement Conference since its inception, because as many of you know, I worked at the ARF for a while. I know how important for you as an attendee it is to hear from clients, and that was a really guiding focus for us as we designed this program for you today. We wanted to make sure you had a chance to hear from the clients about how they're using research. We have 3 outstanding brands with us today. And our first presenter this afternoon will be Pat McLean from Verizon Interactive. Pat's actually going to take us through a very brief case study that demonstrates how Verizon was able to use research insights from Compete as it transitioned toward a more digital focus in order to meet the changing needs of its consumers. After Pat, Helen Katz of Starcom Mediavest Group is going to talk about the Holy Grail, addressable television advertising. Helen will share some of the tests that SMG has done over the years and participated in over the years, and then also will share with you some thoughts about the potential as addressable advertising goes live at the beginning of January through DirecTV and measured by Kantar Media. And then our final speaker is Charlie Treadwell from Cisco. Now, Charlie's actually doing double duty today. He's going to share with you some thoughts about how social monitoring services from Symphony have helped Cisco. And then later today, you can see him in the last Key Issue Forum session, and he'll be talking about how millennials use video in a very fascinating paper that he and Michelle Vangel are presenting. Time permitting, at the end of the session, we'll take a couple of questions. So as the speakers are doing their presentations, take notes, and we certainly want to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask them your questions. But without further ado, we're going to start with Pat so that we can get on with the program. Pat.
Great, thank you. As Diane mentioned, I'm going to share with you what I think is a really fascinating case study. Any of you who are involved with managing big brands, trying to make this transition to digital, I think a lot of this will resonate for you. So I'm going to just start, probably a lot of you are familiar with Verizon from the wireless side, but for those of you who don't live in an area where we have landline footprint, we're also a very powerful brand in the telecom landline business. Verizon in the Northeast and Potomac and in some spot areas, we have a fiber to the home property which allows us to deliver some of the highest bandwidth to the home and what I consider to be the best TV product in the market today through our Fios platform. So I'm going to talk about that property. So for those of you who want me to talk iPhone, things like that, I'm not going to do that. I live in this Fios line of business, so that's the area I'm going to spend some time. So, you know, the other thing that I think is really interesting about Verizon is that in addition to people thinking about us in some context in the wireless side of our business, and if you're in Fios footprint, you'd be very familiar with our Fios brand, but people also think of us sometimes as the phone company. And a lot of times that holds us back. And one of the reasons why they think about us as the phone company is that, well, of course, we are the phone company, but also because we have continued to reinforce that over the years. Most of our advertising, even till very recently, was very, very focused on a call center orientation from a distribution perspective. And we were indicating to all of our customers that that's where we wanted to do business with them. And so as the company looks forward and as we look at our market today, as we know, customers don't want to interact with us on the phone anymore. They want to interact with us through digital means. And by the way, if you think about a business that's under some pretty severe margin pressure, which telecom is generally, you got to think about your cost structure. And from a call center orientation to a digital orientation, there's a tremendous amount of value to be unlocked there from a distribution perspective. And so that's the role that digital is going to play for us in making this transition to being where the customers want to be with us and interacting with them where they want to be interacted with, and also transforming the cost base and margin performance of our business in the meantime. Most of you in the room will know this. We see a lot of the trends that everybody else sees. Very important for us to really take those to heart, though, because when you think about our culture has for decades really been oriented to a call center mindset. And so part of the change that's going on internally at Verizon is not just from a marketing strategy shift, but we're also trying to embrace all of the customer insight and all the learning about what's happening in the market and what's happening with our customers. So we know that these customers are living digitally and they want to interact with us digitally. So how do we think about changing our brand and really changing our business to become digital and really to become a digital company? Well, here's the framework that we use internally. The first is we've really got to shift our marketing focus to be focused digitally. And I don't just mean from an advertising perspective, I don't just mean from a where are we spending our media dollars perspective, but every lever and every strategic part of our marketing mix needs to start thinking digital. You think about pricing, for example. One of the great insights that we have is that customers don't buy from us because they think they can get a better deal in the call center. And guess what? They actually can. So you've got this natural, over time, our pricing strategy has been, let's put, these close offers in the call center, and let's put our best prices in the call center. We got to change all that. We got to put our best prices online. We got to reinforce that customers don't need to call us to get the best deal. Call to action, I mentioned the 1-800 number that's usually splashed all over our advertising. That's got to change. We got to start indicating to customers that we're ready to do business with them on .com, ready to do business with them digitally, and just change the way we're preferring to do business and indicate that to our customers through our call to action. And then, of course, there is this shift of spend. So think about where we were a couple years ago. We were spending in the low teens as a % of our dollars in digital. That's now in the 25 to 30% range. So we're really starting to make that shift as well. The other thing we got to do is start moving further and further up this value chain. So we were very underinvested in our platforms from a digital and e-commerce perspective. So we needed to make that investment. And we've done so over the last year and a half, 2 years. We've got a better environment for customers to learn about our products. We've got much more efficient e-commerce performance from a conversion perspective. And we've also invested in some of our existing customer properties to get better at servicing our customers online, and also from an e-commerce perspective once they become a customer of ours. So those investments have been made over the last couple of years. Where we are now is in this real interesting transition phase as we move further up this value chain. And I've got this circled. Two really areas of focus for us, and that's in getting better at targeting and personalizing the experience for people when they interact with us digitally. I'm going to talk mostly about that. We also think that getting more efficient and more effective in social media and getting customers to generate their own content around our brand is a really important evolution for us. So that's another key area. And then ultimately we get into this place where we really are changing our culture. And that gets into a place where a lot of what the airlines have gone through over the last decade or so in transitioning from this real channel orientation to call center. In some cases, we have door-to-door forces out there and a little bit of retail. Just trying to change incentives and culture shift so that we've got cross-channel integration, and those channels are driving back to digital. And then ultimately, when we make these changes and we make these investments, I believe we will become known as a digital brand, and that becomes very powerful for us in a number of different ways. So if you think about what this means, it really means that digital must become a part of our DNA. And I mentioned the airlines. I think they're a great example for us. I also think about, a company like FedEx is a great example. You used to phone FedEx to track your package. And of course, today you would never think to phone FedEx to track your package. And they went through a lot of the transition that we're doing as a brand. So how are we going to do this? What's the main driver of this? Well, the first thing is, we've got to match up some real key KPIs. If you look at the main one that we're driving here is this distribution shift, and we think about channel mix. If you look back in 2009, we were selling less than 10% of our sales were happening through a digital channel. By the end of 2012, we want that to be 50%. And so that's the kind of transformation that we put on the table from our executive team's perspective. That's the way we're thinking from a budget perspective, and that's where we're making our investments. And the key strategy for us is highlighted in this quote. And it's all about this concept of personalization. And I'm just going to read this. When someone acknowledges us as individuals and personalizes our experience based on our unique characteristics, we feel understood and valued. Our feelings of good will increase, our confidence grows, our tolerance broadens. Personalization casts a very powerful spell. And that's a really important concept for us. And the role that insight plays in this is that when you think about personalizing an experience, we typically have thought about geo-targeting, we think about all of the demographic targeting that we can do. But we're thinking about this a little bit differently, and we're thinking about it from the perspective of purchase behavior. And so we've been working with our partner Compete. This has been one of the real areas of insight that's driving this transformation we're making from a digital perspective. People purchase differently online, and it's not just based on whether you're old or young or wealthy or not wealthy. It's how you tend to behave around making decisions, not just from an online perspective, but also offline and in your lives. And so we took that insight to a very extensive piece of research, and we came up with these 5 personas. And these are the types of behavior that we believe these distinct groups exhibit when they purchase our particular category of products and services. So you think about this, and instead of just personalizing an experience to you online, whether you live in New York or whether you live in Los Angeles, we're going to start personalizing and making the experience relevant to you based on the type of purchase behavior that you would exhibit. So an example of that is, you might think about this wheeler dealer person, right? So I'm a wheeler dealer, I just want to get in, I want to get the best deal, and I want to get out. That person's going to be very, very different than this opinion seeker at the end. The opinion seeker is going to want social reinforcement. They're going to want to know, well, what do other people think about this particular set of products and services that I'm considering? But the wheeler dealer couldn't care less. They just want to know, am I getting the best deal? Tell me I'm getting the best deal. Guarantee it for me and I'll move on. So the content experience and really the conversion experience for these people is very, very different. So ultimately, what does this mean? Well, this means that we've got to re-architect the way we think about digital marketing and the way we think about interactive marketing holistically, both from a media perspective, a messaging perspective, and certainly from a site interaction perspective. And it's really, in a way it's simple and in a way it's complex. Today, when you think about it, you go to most websites e-commerce-wise and you get really one version of it. And the customer needs to work really hard to get through the experience, find the content and tools that are most relevant to their purchase decision, and then they're left on their own devices to get through it. What we're really talking about is flipping that on its head and starting to create different paths for different users and making that path very, very relevant to you. Yes, from all of the perspectives of where do you live, who's the competitor in your region, what kind of demographic information we can deduce from you. But more importantly, once you exhibit some type of behavior, for example, if you go to the cable competitor tool that we have on the site, that all of a sudden tells me that you're a certain type of persona. You want to compare, you want more information related to competitors. So I will make that much more prominent to you as you continue through the journey. So that's what we're doing. The role of insight here is critically important because as we begin to optimize these experiences around behavior, between the combination of behavior and all of the other data elements that we have, understanding what's working, what's not working, and continuing to get the insight as to how these behaviors are changing and the types of tools and content we need to present to customers based on what profile they exhibit is critically important. And so in the case of Compete and in the case of our digital agency, we've really brought them together in a very unique way to make sure that those insights are being brought into our ongoing efforts to optimize our digital marketing efforts. So that's our case. I'd be happy to take questions at the end, or if not, then come find me and I'd be happy to share more detail. And now over to Helen.
Well, I hadn't seen your presentation, but it's a perfect segue or precursor to my presentation because we're also talking about personalizing the experience or going from a one-size-fits-all to something smaller than that. And I'm going to talk about our learning on addressable advertising. We've got many challenges facing us today with TV advertising. We need to find a new way to talk to our customers. As anyone who with a DVR knows, or other video screens, consumers increasingly are looking to avoid our ads. And our advertisers, our clients for our agency, are wasting money in sending their ad messages broadly to everyone and assuming, to your point, that one size fits all. And there's a growing concern over the quality and the monetization of the content. And what we're seeing is the potential and the going down the path of different outcomes. As a consumer, you know yourself that you're paying more and more in subscription fees to get the content that you want. At the same time, the content providers are finding that they don't have enough money to produce the quality content that they wish to provide, so the quality diminishes, the audiences get smaller and smaller, the ratings drop, and the advertisers, as we've seen just recently in the upfront, continue to pay significantly more for smaller and smaller audiences. We believe that addressability can actually solve all three outcomes. And the reason addressable advertising provides a solution is that it delivers different TV ads to specific households, groups of households, based on the characteristics of those homes. We think of it as combining the power of direct mail delivered to your house with the power of the internet. It's giving us greater consumer engagement with the ads and providing consumers with greater relevance. And we also believe strongly that it's really offering an important growth engine for the television industry. So this landscape that we live in as marketers is changing, and we have to change with it. We're moving in terms of the distribution from a broadcast system to one that's really unicast. Content is increasingly going to be delivered to individual homes, not to everybody at the same time. We're moving from a world where we typically bought programs to find our audiences to one where we need to buy based on a combination of context and audience. We're moving from just focusing on age and sex demographics to looking at the consumer-based characteristics of the households. We're moving from very broad messaging for everybody to specific messaging for our different target groups. And we can find and reach those, talk to those different groups. And we're moving from a world where we simply had to accept the fact that there was waste in the way we were buying, because we had to buy to everybody, to one where waste can be managed. There are 4 primary benefits of addressable advertising. First off, we can find the true targets, the people we're really interested in reaching. We can improve the relevancy of the message that we send to those targets. We can provide greater accountability, and we can improve the efficiency of the buys. With addressable, we're talking beyond the pure demographics. We can target based on geography, socioeconomics, media usage, lifestyle, retail and purchase behavior, and business data. So we have a whole array of targeting characteristics to choose from. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the addressable work that we've been doing at SMG starting back in 2006. We worked in 2 trials with Comcast, first off in Huntsville, and then secondly in Baltimore. In 2009, we did a test with Cablevision in New York. And just this year, we're working with DirecTV. We've worked with the primary technology partners. Experian has been the third-party data provider. And in 3 of these trials, we've worked with Kantar closely as the independent reporting company, measurement and reporting. There are 2 ways to determine that addressable advertising is working. The first is that in terms of efficiency. How much money can we save by delivering ads only to those homes of interest? And secondly, in terms of effectiveness, are the households who are targeted with an addressable ad less likely to tune away during that ad because it's more relevant to them than homes that have been exposed to a non-addressable ad? And we can say definitively that addressable advertising works. In the most recent trial that we conducted, we saw a 65% increase in efficiency and a 32% increase in effectiveness. So in Baltimore, just to give you a sense of what we mean when we're talking about addressable targeting, the segments that we target, in this trial, we were taking a spot, dividing it into 4 different segments, 3 that were targets and 1 that was the all other group and the control group. We had 5 advertisers participating. This was a test with 60,000 households, subscribing households, and the target segments could be as small as 3% and as large as 38% of the households. And what we learned over time that is critical in this kind of scenario to try and minimize the percent of homes that aren't targeted. An example of the segmentation scheme from the way we worked with Experian to define these targets. This was multi-brand target segmentation, so we had the 3 different target groups: Hispanics, healthcare advocates, and caregivers. And the 4th group, which was the default group, that was the balance of those non-addressable the households who didn't fit into any of the other 3 targets, plus the control group. And they received the default ad, so they didn't receive an addressable ad. And then we deduplicated the 3 target groups so that households were only considered in 1 target. Most advertisers saw significant efficiency savings. It wasn't the same for every advertiser or every brand. But just as an example here, the 88%, that means that For advertiser D, brand A saved 88% in reaching just that target segment and not paying for any other group. So in overall, like I said, it was 65%. We measured effectiveness in terms of the decrease in tune away with a pre-post test versus control method, and this is where Kantar's role was critical to the success of this trial. We had addressable homes and control homes. We set up a baseline period where we looked at the tune away of those homes before we introduced addressable advertising, so we could see if there was any inherent differences between those two groups. And then we introduced addressable advertising and again assessed the tune away to see if there was any difference in tune away both between test and control and pre to post. And we did a statistical test to determine the difference. Again, when you break it down by advertiser, overall it was 32%, but in this particular trial and in our previous trials, not every advertiser saw an increase in effectiveness, although many did, and there are many reasons that I could go into later as to why not everybody automatically sees an increase in a decrease in tune away or an increase in effectiveness. But you see a range, and for many it was it was a big drop in tune away. And then we were able, because we're talking set-top data and we're looking at it by target segment, we can dig into the data further, and this is going to give you a couple of examples here. For one advertiser where we had a client database matched over the the households, we could see two seemingly similar addressable targets were actually watching different networks. So in this case, on the target on the left, what we call the true target was the client database, and these were the top 10 networks compared to the control group that was not targeted and the networks that this group was watching. And over on the right, we had a very similar target that was demographically similar, but was not part of the client database. And there's some overlap, but they also had their unique set of networks that they were more likely to be watching. And neither of these sets of networks were generally the same as the ones in the client's buying target. So the advantage of having this kind of addressable segmentation and the ability to dig into the set-top data gives you much greater granularity and ability to analyze a lot more than you typically do with TV. Another way to look at the data is to combine the ratings and the tune away for each individual target to find what we call the sweet spot networks, that is, those networks that had a high rating and low tune away. In this particular example, you can see the networks in the top right, and in this trial we had 8 networks in total, so we're not talking hundreds of networks to choose from. And now what we're working on, the next in our series of addressable is not a test, it's a full launch, and that's with DirecTV. We've been working with them in 2011. The launch will happen in early 2012, and this is the full deployment will deliver ads to 8 to 10 million households. So going from tests of several thousand households, tens of thousands of households, now we're talking millions of households that we can reach with addressable advertising. The insertions will happen in local inventory on multiple cable networks. And the advertiser in this case, instead of having a spot that's divided into, that you take the whole spot and you have to divide it up, here the advertiser will only be buying the desired households, and a DR ad will be delivered to the remainder. And that is where we're at right now. And I'll take questions after Charlie.
Thank you, Helen. I'm actually going to talk about how Cisco uses Kantar Media's Symphony platform to drive insight through listening. So just last month, actually, HP did the keynote at the Interop IT conference. And instead of just focusing on their platform and their value proposition, they spent the entire 48 minutes really bashing on how Cisco's platforms was really falling behind in our products. We're not as innovative as theirs anymore. I was planning on showing you guys the video, but it's 48 minutes, and they told me that I couldn't because we're running behind, so we're not going to watch that. So just to look at some of the data that we gathered, you see that there were 256 stories that we looked at that looked at both HP and Cisco at this Interop conference. 40 to 40% of the sentiment on the references of HP were positive to negative, so it was pretty even. The sentiment on Cisco's percentage was 15% positive to 25% negative. And the reach of the negative Twitter conversations at Interop about HP was 165,000. And the negative reach about Cisco on Twitter was 10,000, almost 11,000. So you can see the negative reach in their negative conversation talking about us really kind of backfired against what they were trying to do. The thing that was really interesting that we really wanted to dive into the data and understand was that on the lower two bars, you see the actual sentiment of how traditional media actually perceived this. 73% perceived their keynote as positive for HP and negative for Cisco. When we dove into the social data, the analyst bloggers, the people that were at the conference using Twitter, and our other customers, you see that there was 95% negative, or sorry, 95 counts, which was almost 60% negative about HP, and almost no but all neutral about Cisco. Some of the comments that you see, things like Hewlett and Packard were known for innovation, now HP is known for trash talk. One that I really liked, because it showed the reach of this conversation, was, I didn't see Dave's keynote, but I hear a lot of post-presentation commentary. Much of the networking crowd was aghast. This is all the content from Twitter. We had 89% of the conversations on Twitter referring to HP were negative, while 69% referring to Cisco were actually just neutral. So you really see that this negative slant that they tried to put on their keynote really backfired on them when it came to the customers and the people actually at the conference, including the analysts and bloggers. So when you look at the balance of the sentiment for both Cisco and HP, you'll see that HP's conversation is really polarized by both positive and negative, while Cisco was much more in the neutral side with a little bit of an uptick in the negative. So while HP's strategy was to really bash our products and talk about how they weren't up to par with what they were presenting, it really backfired on them because the crowd didn't believe what they were saying, or they looked at them as being bullies against us. So what this really led us to do is we realized that as we've taken HP head on in the servers market, we know that now that the gloves are obviously off, they're coming straight after us. But by looking at this data, we start to understand that by taking this negative approach in these large public forums, it's actually going to backfire on us. So our response is really not to meet them where they are, but really to take the high road and to really work with our salespeople to make sure that they understand that HP was using this forum to actually compare their products to products of ours that were 2 or 3 years older. And so this is something where we really have to raise insight about how HP was actually not even talking about something that was relevant to the current conversation. The other thing that we need to do is really focus on getting our customers to speak for us. Obviously, our customers that were in the audience didn't agree with what HP was saying, so we want to try to up-level that and actually spread that more to our other customers. And the other thing with the traditional media perceiving this as positive for HP and negative for Cisco, that has some serious implications for our overall brand and our shareholders. While the social media is really for our customers and the analysts, we have to pay attention to both in order to actually have actionable insight on it. So the last thing that we had to do also is our company is going through a transition right now, and HP used this as an opportunity to attack us. And we need to do a better job really communicating Cisco's value so that people can turn around and respond to these types of attacks that are coming to us, even though they're not really directly focused on our real value proposition. But so that's how we use Symphony, and we'll take any questions now if you guys have any.
So digital transformation, addressable advertising, and reputation management, social media monitoring. We have a very broad spectrum of topics. And while you think about the questions that you want to ask, if you don't mind, I'd like to open with a couple. You know, Charlie, the reputation management I found interesting, especially from a B2B perspective. How else are you using social media monitoring throughout Cisco?
So some of the other ways that we actually use Symphony is through some of our message penetration. We'll actually put in some of our key messaging that we're looking to market and advertise, and then we'll actually measure against our competitors how those are being picked up and perceived. And then we'll also use it for really just capturing overall share of voice in each of the market segments, because we're obviously very diverse. And in many of our market segments, we have different competitors. So with this one, it's specifically HP with data centers and servers. But in some of our other markets, it would be completely different.
And so in using this information, has it changed the way that then, once you've got the information in front of you, that you're taking the message out to your clients as well, and your marketing efforts?
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is we actually put together dashboards of this every quarter that goes all the way up to our CMO and our CEO. So this is not just information that just our salespeople are using. this is actually stuff that we're using for planning our business.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So Helen, let's talk about the Holy Grail. Certainly, it's something that everybody wants. I mean, I don't own a car, don't have any desire to ever have a car, don't really want to see car commercials, and I'm sure that there are commercials out there that I wouldn't mind seeing that others are okay with. How are your clients responding to this? Are they excited about the opportunity to really do a much more targeted effort with consumers?
We have pretty much clients lined up wanting to do this. It's very, especially because we've been through and we've tested it first, and so we feel like we've got some good learning about what works, what doesn't, how to do it properly, and so we have very enthusiastic clients waiting to get involved. We've done about 12 advertisers have participated in the trials, and so as we scale it, that'll quadruple at least probably. Are
they doing anything with their creative that will be different?
In the tests, several of them did, but not everybody, because it was a test and obviously there's a cost involved for creative. But that's one of the learnings that we've had, and obviously if you're able to send your message to the group you really want to reach, there's a potential benefit to having targeted creative developed just for them. So.
And when you're looking at measuring the effects and you're looking at the data that comes back, how critical is it to be using an independent provider of that type of measurement?
We feel it's really important, just like, in the linear TV world, it's not the TV network, so we're reporting to you. It's an independent company that's doing that. So independent reporting and measurement is just as important, if not more so, for the addressable product.
Great. So Pat, we hear a lot, certainly within Kantar I know, about the importance of insights and providing insights to our clients, not just giving them data.
Yep.
And so as you're looking at this entire digital transformation that you're going through, and you're learning about how consumers want to access things, how they're using it, how critical are those insights to you, and how are you using them as you develop your strategy or alter it to meet their needs?
Well, it's interesting because in a lot of ways we have this kind of insatiable desire for data and insight, but sometimes that can get in the way because you can't see the forest from the trees, or you just can't find the insight that matters. So for me, a lot of it is creating kind of an analytics and insight framework, which I think we've done with these personas, because we're now saying, these are the type of people that we want to address, and the way that we're thinking about a new way of segmenting our customer base or our target market. And so how do we then align not just the analytics and the data we can collect about them, but how do we turn that into real insight about them? And then the next challenge that we have, and by the way, just to plug Compete again, I mean, one of the values of having an insight partner like Compete is that these are real people. There are real people in the panel, there are real people that are buying our products, they're researching our products and our competitors' products, so we can validate some of the analytics that we see through the real, the real insight that comes from that. So I think that's really important. The one challenge that I think we're trying to work through is how do you get faster at taking that insight and acting on it? Because for me, if somebody comes to the table with real insight that says this group of customers is really looking for this type of content or this type of information, I want to be able to provide that to them really, really quickly. And so we're trying to match up the pace at which we're getting this insight with our ability to react and change our digital ecosystem to be able to react to that insight. So lots of challenges there, but I think if you get it right, the payoff is huge.
As you created the persona and these 5, in essence, customer types, were there any things that you found surprising or that maybe internally were really difficult for folks to accept because it seemed to go against what they felt or knew?
Well, what was interesting is that the personas go across demographics. So you don't see as much, there's a little bit of this, but you don't see necessarily the opinion seeker skewing to young adult, for example, which you might expect. You do see some variation in the percent of overlap that you might have in one persona and some demographic or geographic information you might be able to match it up with. But the surprise that we had was what we thought was going to happen when we went into it was that the behavioral study that we would do would map pretty closely to what you would normally do from a life stage segmentation, but that didn't necessarily turn out to be the case. It really was another insight or another data element to overlay to data and insight we were already acting on. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it was a really fascinating study for us because it really did break down the traditional way we would think about market segmentation. And because you can do it with real customers and observing their behavior in a digital way, it's really deep insight and it becomes pretty powerful. And so then the key is, how do you make it actionable?
So this is your opportunity. Does anyone have any questions you'd like to pose to our guests here about digital transformation? Yes, in the middle. I think there are microphones coming. Can you just tell us who you are and where you're from?
Michael Vincent from Rentrack. And my question is for Helen about kind of a follow-on to Diane's question. It seems to me the holy grail would be to do addressable advertising on a national basis, not to do it in a single market or with a single operator. Obviously, there are technological barriers to doing so, but can you predict when, if that will ever become a reality?
We are saying we think in 10 years that we'll have it fully figured out and national. That's our prediction right now. It does take a while.
Yes, over here, please.
Hi, it's Jay Matlin from GFKMRI. Another question for Helen, actually two questions. First of all, what do you do with the 18 to 40% of people who aren't targeted, who don't fall into one of the target groups? And the second question I had was, it appeared that there was a difference between the personas developed by Verizon and the targets that you're able to assemble, which seem to be mostly demographically driven. And I guess I wanted to know how granular you can make those targets.
Those are good questions. The first question depends on how the addressability is set up. So in the case of our Comcast trials, we had each spot was could be divided. You could send 4 different spots where normally you would send 1. And so you had a chance to send 3 different targeted spots, and then you had to use the rest of the avail to send another spot. So that was why there was what we call the default. We also put the control group in there. In the DirecTV system, you just do it, send the messages to your different targets. So you send 1 spot to dog-owning households if you're a pet food manufacturer, and everyone else will get a DR ad. So it's an overlay on top of an existing ad, so you don't have to worry about the other households you're not interested in. So it's in some ways a more elegant solution. It's a different technological solution. So that's part 1. And then part 2 was, we worked with Experian in these trials, and so we're taking Experian household characteristics. And the reason I think that certainly in the first trial, we couldn't dig too deep was simply the size of the universe. So in Huntsville, we had 8,000 households, and in Baltimore, we had 60,000 households. And so you can't cut it 7,000 ways at one time to reach a target to get too discrete, because you don't have enough households in the pool. Again, now we're looking at 8 to 10 million at scale with DirecTV, and therefore you can get more granular in your target definition.
Anyone else?
Hi, Stan Fetterman, Telmar. I guess Helen is the winner today on the question. I'm listening to all this talk about persona planning. Well, we call it persona planning, and there certainly has been a lot of excellent research that tells us that we should be directing towards individuals, and we can do that in mobile, and we can do it in social, and we can do it in certainly most of the internet. But when it comes to television, we have a little difficulty. Yet with all this talk of persona, it sounds like most of the efficiencies and effectiveness measures that you're using are against households. And it just seems like a little disconnect. Can you bring those two together for me, please?
I think right now we're considering households as the lowest level to go with television. And I think it comes down to concerns about privacy. I'm not even sure the targeting feasibility of finding individuals in households that you would target. But certainly, I think there's a difference between the way you target on the internet to some degree and the way you would target with television. And certainly, and also technologically, I'm not sure that the technology exists to send different messages to individuals. We're talking households for addressable advertising for now.
So Pat, Charlie, and Helen will be around for the rest of the afternoon. I'm sure that they'd be happy to answer any questions if you guys want to reach out to them a little bit later. But in the meantime, thank you all very much. Greatly appreciate it. And we'll turn it back to Terry.